All right, so to honor what Sydney talked about with rest, we're just going to take a nap for 25 minutes, and then we'll do communion now. So I don't always agree with the philosophy that every single sermon has to end with an invitation. I'm all fine with that and everything. It comes from the Frontier Church and, all that kind of revival stuff, and that's great. But we do it on 100% of the sermons. I don't know if I agree with that 100%. But this sermon that Jesus preaches, here at the end, we're at Matthew chapter 7, the end of the Sermon on the Mount. He gives an invitation here, and that's what this is today. That's what it is today. Jesus here at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, at the end of his sermon, he gives a time to decide. What are you going to do? What are you going to do now? You've heard me out. Now what are you going to do? This sermon, we've called this sermon series Manifesto because this sermon is kind of Jesus' manifesto. And what that is it's a leader, whether it be a political leader or some other kind of leader, but it's a leader's system of beliefs. This is what I believe, and this is if you follow me, if you live in my country, if you live in my kingdom, this is who you will be as well. Okay? This is a manifesto. And Jesus has said all throughout this sermon, if you're going to be a part of my kingdom, this is what that will look like. If you're going to be a part of my group, this is who you will look like. You want to be a citizen in my country, this is what that means. And he gets to the end here and he says, okay, now it's time to decide. What are you going to do? Are you going to follow or are you going to not follow? Jesus believed himself to be the Messiah. Jesus is evident throughout this sermon, the things he said, throughout the course of his life, the actions he took and the things he said, he believed he was God's anointed one. He was God's Christ. And according to the Jews, there were several things that were going to happen when the Messiah came. Now, different groups thought different things. They weren't unanimous. But there was one thing that was everyone believed, and that's when the Messiah comes, Israel is going to enter its golden age. Okay, Israel's going to prosper, and it's going to be the way it was supposed to be, and they're going to enter their golden age. Okay, that's what everyone believed, and I think Jesus did too, but he just redefined it a little bit. There are tons of benefits that come from living in the time of the Messiah. Every Jew believed if you live when the Messiah comes, man, that's going to be just amazing for you. And Jesus, I think, believed that too. Again, though, I think he changed it a little bit. He said there's all kinds of wonderful things that come from following me. If you follow me, there are all kinds of benefits that you have. Your life will be transformed for the better. You'll have God on your side. There's all kinds of wonderful things that we get from following Jesus. We live in that messianic age. We live post-Christ. There's all kinds of wonderful things, wonderful blessings we have because of Jesus. But we only get them if we follow him. We only get them if we follow Jesus. We don't get them just because we know a certain amount about Jesus or because we've read a certain amount about Jesus or because we've been to enough church services. None of that gets us that. We don't get the blessing of following Christ unless we follow Christ. And honestly, Jesus is the only thing we treat this way. I mean, you think about it. Like, cable TV is really cool, but I don't get any of the benefits of that just because I know about it. Like, I know a bunch about it. I've been over to your house and I've watched your TV and I've seen it. Okay, but I go home to my TV and turn it on, I don't get that because I don't actually subscribe to it just because I know about it. Just because I know about a computer, you have a great computer, I've seen you use it, I've seen all the cool things you do with it. Maybe I've even read a manual on it. I've read all kinds of information about computers, but I don't actually have a computer. I don't get any of the benefits of that. Knowing about something doesn't mean you suddenly get all the benefits that come along with that. But we treat Jesus that way. Right? I grew up in the church. I know all the Sunday school answers. I know everything you know, so I should have all the benefits of following Jesus. And then we're shocked when we don't, right? Like, I went through a hard time, and I didn't have any peace, and my patience is low, and all those fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all those things that are wonderful. Everybody wants love. They want to be loved. They want to love others. Everybody wants patience. Everybody wants peace. I mean, peace is amazing. Everybody seeks peace. And yet, for some reason, I don't have those benefits, and I know just as much about Jesus as you do, and yet I've seen those benefits in your life. What am I doing wrong? I think Jesus today is going to tell us that, just listening to what I've said, hearing what I've said, knowing what I've said isn't enough. You have to follow if you want the benefits of being in God's kingdom, of living under the rule of Christ. And that's where we're at the end of Matthew chapter 7 today. Matthew chapter 7. Verses 24 through 29. I'm just going to read it here. It says this. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the wind beats against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. And when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike their teachers of religious law. You only get the benefits if you follow Jesus. We can build our house wherever we want, but you only get the benefits if you build it on Jesus. Both these groups heard Jesus. You hear my words and you follow, and you hear my words and you don't follow. They both knew what Jesus said, but only one group was able to stand when the storm came. Only one group got the benefits of following Jesus because they actually followed Jesus, didn't just hear him. See, what Jesus is talking here is about our foundation in life. Everyone's life has a foundation. Everyone's life is built on a foundation. Our foundations are kind of the context in which we live our lives. They're the bottom level of our lives. And every choice that we make, whether it be small or big, who to marry, what career path to choose, what religion we follow, all of these things that we choose in our lives, they're tied to our foundation. Our foundation is what we decide, that's good and that's worthy and that's something I should pour my time into. And that's a waste of time and I shouldn't do that. And someone else will look at those exact same choices and flip them. This is a good thing to do. This is a good use of time, and no, that's a waste of time. That's not important. And the reason is our foundation that we build in our lives. That influences what we think of as good and holy, and what we think of as that's kind of wasteful. I don't know why they pursued that. That's not very interesting. It comes down to our foundation. Everyone's life has a foundation like this, and the Bible constantly refers to this foundation in our lives. In fact, in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. It says this: don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Paul there is talking about this foundation in your life. He wants transformation. He says God wants you to transform. He doesn't want you to transform from like a human being into a bunny rabbit. That's not transformation he's talking about. He wants you to still be you, but to transform. And so what he means there is this whole idea of the way we think. You have to change the way you think. Don't think like the world. Don't use their foundation. You need to transform and use Christ's foundation. In fact, later on in Colossians chapter 1, verse 13, he says the same thing, just in different words. He says, for he has rescued us from the kingdom of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his dear Son. We were over here, and we thought this way, and we thought this was acceptable, and we thought this was bad, and we had this whole way of thinking. It was influenced by our culture, it was influenced by our past, our history, it was influenced by our parents. There were all kinds of influences, but we had this way of thinking. But now you've been moved, you've changed addresses, you live over here now, and now you should have a whole different way of thinking. Different things are acceptable, different things are bad. You have a different way of looking at the world. You have a different way of looking at the poor, looking at those around you. You have a different way of thinking now. The Bible constantly talks about foundations in people's lives because it constantly talks about wanting to change those foundations. You were living here, but now you're living here. And it's different. It's transformation. It changes your foundation. Everyone's life has this foundation. And the foundation is supposed to do two things in your life. And the first one I kind of already talked about. First thing is it's supposed to influence your life, all the decisions you make. But the thing is, oftentimes it influences it and we don't even realize it. We don't even realize it. I do this or I do that, and that's great. And then, I really am interested in this, or I spend my money on this, I spend my time on that, and that's great. But a lot of times our foundation influences that and we don't even realize it. Our culture tells us that that's good. Our culture tells us that's permissible. And we don't even think about it. Oh, no, I like that. Well, I know you like that, but why do you like that? And oftentimes it comes down to that bottom level in our lives. So it influences everything we do. A lot of times it goes unnoticed, though. And the second thing a good foundation should do is it should be something that you fall back on in times of hardship. When something bad happens and it just rocks your life, what do you stand on? And it should be that foundation. That's what I think of as good. That's why I keep going. That's my meaning in life, is that foundation. So those are the two things. And Jesus here, he talks about two different foundations for your life. My words or something else. And that's it. There are two foundations possible for everyone's lives. To follow God, to follow Yahweh, to follow their Creator or not. There's not three foundations. There's not four. There's not 90 or 100. There's two. Those who hear my words and they follow them. And those who hear my words and say, no, that's not good enough. That's not enough for me. I'm going to go do my own thing. Which foundation is it going to be? And Jesus wants us to decide that. Which foundation are we going to build our lives upon? His words or something else? Only two options. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about this morning is that other option, the world's foundation. The world offers you a foundation. It does all the time. Whether it's it's different in different countries, but it's always there. Through our media, through our culture, through people around us, the world offers you a foundation. And almost anywhere you go, this foundation is going to be the same. It's the foundation of self. It's built on you. I'm the most important thing. My foundation is built on me. I'm going to read real quick again, Matthew chapter 7, verses 26 and 27. It says this, "But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash." This foundation, this sand foundation, it's built on self. It's built on me, not Jesus, me. Those are the only two options. I can build it on someone else, I can build it on Jesus and his words, or I can build it on myself. And when I build it on myself, I am the most important thing. Everything that I do runs through me. Is that good for me? Should I do that? Is that something that I think is wise? And the problem with this is that it really fails as a foundation. Those two things that we talked about. The first thing is that it really screws up my life a lot of times. In fact, Jesus tells a parable about this in Luke chapter 12, verse 16 through 20. He says, "Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, 'What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops.' And then he said, 'I know. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I will have enough room to store all my wheat and other goods. And I will sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything that you worked so hard for?'" See, when we make decisions in our lives built on ourself, they oftentimes lead to ruin. They lead to ruin. And you know why? Because I don't know what I want. My wants, my needs, what I think I need, that changes all the time. All the time. Okay? What I like right now, what I think is good right now, a good life decision, or what I want to do, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, I might think, no, that's dumb, I'm going to do something else. But I've already committed so many resources to it. I'm fickle, okay? And I'm not perfect. I make so many bad decisions, right? Oh, yeah, this sounds like a really good idea. And everyone else but me is saying, no, that's really dumb, Cody. And I'm like, no, this is good. This will be great. This will be great. All right? And then it ends up terrible because I'm not perfect. I'm not. And my wants change all the time, just like sand. It's not solid. It's subjective. It's not objective. And because of that, if I try to build my life on myself, I'll oftentimes end up in ruin. This makes me feel good. Why shouldn't I do it? And then a year from now, oh man, I'm really addicted to this. And it's running my life now. But originally it felt good, so why shouldn't I do it? I'm the one that means the most. My life is built on me. Why shouldn't I do this? But now I'm addicted to drugs or I'm addicted to alcohol. Why shouldn't I do this? This is the way I'm going to make the most money. So why shouldn't I pursue this? And now my family's left me because I didn't spend any time with them. But this was going to make me the most money, so why shouldn't I do it? But now my life's in ruin. See, oftentimes when we make decisions based on ourselves, it has such a high chance of leading to ruin in our lives. The second thing about this foundation, though, built on the self, is it doesn't do a good job of supporting us when things get difficult. See, the foundation of the self, the world foundation, it always uses this line, and it's a lie, but it sounds really good. It uses this line: as long as nothing goes wrong in my life, I'll be fine. Okay? This plan that I've made, this decision I've made for my life or my career or whatever, as long as nothing goes wrong in my life, I'll be fine. And the problem with that is that something will go wrong in your life. We live in a broken world. We live in a fallen world. We live in a world that was great, but then sin came in and now it's broke. And let me tell you, something will go wrong in your life. Someone you know will pass away, someone you're close to, someone that you know will hurt you or harm you. You'll get something that's going to be deadly. You'll have some kind of illness. You'll lose a job. All these things will happen to you. And this foundation that's just built on myself ends up collapsing in that. I was really focused on my career. I wanted to make money. I wanted to make a name for myself. I love doing this. I want to be someone. I want to make an impact on the world. And so you pour all your energy into that. And then the economy takes a turn and your job gets cut and you get let go. And then what happens? What's the point? What's the point of it all? What's the meaning? Why should I get up? That's all I cared about. If nothing would have ever went wrong, I would have been fine, but something did go wrong. If nothing ever goes wrong, I'm going to be fine, but now I've got cancer. Now what? What's the point? What's the point? My whole life was spread out before me, but now it's not. Now I'm not in control of anything. Other people tell me what to do. What's the point? See, if we run our own lives, it's not a very good foundation. It's like jumping up in the air, grabbing your feet, and then hoping you can hold yourself up off the ground. Okay? That's what happens when you try to run your own life. When I know what's best for me, is that oftentimes it leads to bad decisions. And the second thing is that whenever something bad happens, it wrecks your life. It wrecks your life. And so Jesus here this morning, he gives us these two foundations. And it's crucial. He wants us to know this. It's crucial to decide which one are you going to build your life on. Are you going to build your life on the sand or are you going to build your life on the rock? And you need to figure it out quickly. Okay? And here's the reason. Because the storm's going to come. Life's going to throw a storm at you. Bad things will happen. Something's going to happen. And if your life's built on sand, your house is going to be halfway down the river and you're going to realize, oh man, I really needed a good foundation. I should probably start building my foundation. And you're going to try to start digging in the water like you're in the river already. When tragedy strikes, when something hard happens, we usually realize, oh man, I made so many poor choices. I really mishandled that. I need to get my act together. But it's so much harder to get your act together in the midst of chaos than it is when you're healthy. So Jesus wants us to say, hey, decide now. Are you going to build your life on my words, or are you going to build it on something else? Because when the storm comes, it's so much harder to get your life together. So do it now, before it happens. So then Jesus gives us this other option, building our life on his words. You can listen to my words and say, no, that's not good enough. And you can try to build your house on sand. Or you can listen to my words and say, yes, I'm going to follow that. So we build on Christ's foundation. Let me read again, Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25. It says this: anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. So in contrast to building on sand, which is just ridiculous, in contrast to doing that, we build on rock. We build on bedrock. And Jesus says the wise do that. And so my next question would be, why do the wise choose Jesus? The wise build their lives on my words. Well, I want to be wise. I know I'm not, so I want to be. So why do the wise do that? Why do the wise do that? And it's because they know the answer to this question: who is Jesus? Who is this man? Who is this guy to tell me what to do? This guy's said all kinds of crazy things in this sermon. Outlandish ways to live, things that don't make any sense in the real world. That's what this guy said. Who is he to say that? Who is this man? And the wise know the answer to that, and that's why they build their lives on his words. Because if this man is the Son of God, if this man is the one who was before all creation, if he is our loving parent, if that's who Jesus is, then it makes all the sense in the world to build our lives on his words. Because everything he says is for our benefit then. If he made me, if he's a loving parent, then everything he says is for my benefit. And if I've figured out who Jesus is, then it makes all the sense in the world to build my life on him. The wise build their lives on Jesus' words because they know who he is. And that's the ultimate question Jesus wants to ask. You got to decide, who am I? Who am I? Am I just some good teacher that lived at some point? Am I just another rabbi? Am I just another traveling itinerant preacher? Who am I? Am I any of those things, or am I God's son? Because that will determine what you build your life on. Those are your two options. You see, if he's just a good teacher, there's a couple things that are going to happen to you. If he's just a good teacher, the first thing that's going to happen is that some of the things that Jesus says are not going to make any sense at all to you. He's just a good teacher. He said some good things, but let me tell you, some of the things he said are pretty crazy, right? Like, love your enemies, and that's it. There's no, conditions on that. Love your enemies. So I'm supposed to love, Al-Qaeda. Yeah, right. Okay, Jesus. When you get struck on the face, turn the other cheek. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. All right, when someone borrows from you, don't expect them to return. Oh yeah, that's a good business strategy. That doesn't work in the real world, Jesus. Some of the things he says won't make sense. And if he's just a good teacher, then you can cut some of that out. And the second thing that's going to happen, if he's just a good teacher, if that's all that you think of him as, you won't get any of the benefits for building your life on him. You may know all there is to know about Jesus. You may have read books, read the Bible, grown up in Sunday school. You may know all that there is to know about Jesus, but he won't be any source of security for you in times of hardship. Why don't I have the peace that others have? I've went to church plenty of times. I've read my New Testament through. Why don't I have the peace that they have? Why don't I have the patience that he has? Why don't I have the love that he has? Why can't I treat my family like that? Why don't I have that? And it's because to you, Jesus is just a good teacher. He's just a guy who said some good things. And you don't get those benefits unless you have the Spirit. You don't get these wonderful, life-changing, God-altering things unless you follow, not just listen. So if Jesus is just a good teacher, that's what's going to happen. But if he's the Son of God, if he's a loving parent, there's going to be some different things that happen. First thing is this: your life will be fulfilled. Jesus made you, and a creature that without its creator is a terrible thing. But your life will be fulfilled. That's not saying your life will be easy or make sense. That's not at all what that's saying. Right? Stuff that Jesus says will still make no sense to you. I'm a believer, I follow him, I've been baptized, I'm all on fire for Jesus, and yet I still don't get this, all right? How does this work in my life? And there will still be times of hardship, all right? There will still be pain that you go through. But your life will be fulfilled. I think of the Apostle Paul, right? Apostle Paul, great guy, really on fire for God loves God so much he's killing Christians, but that's because he loves God, okay? Love God, these guys are wrong. Meets Jesus and says, oh man, I was wrong. Yeah, I'm on your team now, Jesus. Whatever you want, I'm there for you, okay? Meets Jesus, and then Jesus says, great, you're on my team, and Paul says, yeah. Paul, who, basically had a PhD in Judaism, right? Like, I knew everything there is to know about being a Jew, Pharisee of Pharisees, Hebrew of Hebrews. Like, I am the Jew, okay? And Jesus says, great, you're on my team. And Paul says, yep. And he says, I want you to go to the Gentiles. And Paul says, wait a second. Are you sure? Are you sure you don't want me to preach you to the Jews? See, he wants to preach Jesus. I want to preach Jesus. Are you sure you don't want me to preach you in Israel? Nope, I want you to go out. I want you to go out to the Gentiles. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then also Paul, who went through floggings and beatings and shipwrecks and bitten by snakes and kicked out and left for dead and stoning and all that. And I think if you went to him at the end of his life as he's waiting in prison to be beheaded, I think if you went to him and you said, hey, was it worth it? I think Paul would say, yeah, it was. I've got no regrets. If Jesus is the Son of God and you follow him and you commit your life to him, you will have a fulfilled life. It won't make sense all the times, and it won't be easy, but it will be fulfilled. And the second thing is this: you will have bedrock as your foundation, a source of security when the storms of life come. We trick ourselves so easily into thinking nothing that bad will happen. But there's a high probability that it will. And when it does, if you follow God, you've got both a foundation and also a hope. You've got a foundation where you have a God that goes through it with you. If you get cancer or if you have someone that you lose that's close to you, you have no meaning. What's the point of it all? Something terrible has happened to me. What's the point? But if you have God and something terrible happens to you, you have a God who's right there with you, who's crying when you cry, who loves you, who wants the best for you. You have someone that goes through it with you. You have someone who's experienced that pain with you, that pain of losing a child, that pain of dying. You've had someone who's been through that, and he's there with you. What an amazing thing that is. But also, you've got security in the future. If you don't have God and something like that happens, I mean, what's the point? What's going to happen? I lost my child, I lost my spouse, and now they're gone. But if you have God, you have, no, one day I'll see them again. One day I'll run with them again. I'll play with them again. I'll laugh with them again one day because I have God, because I have Jesus. If you follow him, that's the kind of foundation you have. Jesus says there's two foundations. There's just two. Build your life on my words or don't. And that's it. Those are your options. And the wise choose Jesus, and the foolish don't. They say, I got it, I can do it on my own, I don't need Jesus, I've got it. But the wise choose Jesus. And at the very end of this sermon, after Jesus has made this plea to decision time, you guys need to make a decision. Here it is. Here's the two options. Now choose. Which one are you going to follow? It says this at the very end of Matthew chapter 7, verse 28 and 29. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike their teachers of religious law. Amazed at his teaching. Who is this guy that says all this stuff? What an amazing thing that is. What an incredible thing that is. In fact, the Greek word for amazed here is ekpleso, and that means not just, oh, that's impressive, or oh, that's really cool. Ekpleso means I'm like about to lose consciousness because my senses are being overwhelmed. I mean, it's just blown away, like hairs whipped back, like just, I am amazed right now. That's what the crowd was feeling. But here's the thing, Jesus doesn't want your amazement. I think we should be amazed. I think when we come into God's presence and we don't leave amazed, there's something wrong with that, right? Like Isaiah, when he stands before God and he sees the throne and he says, woe is me. Woe is me, ruin on me, because I'm not worthy to be here. He was amazed. We should be amazed. But that's not really what Jesus is interested in here. Because you see, all the time we could be amazed. We can come away from a sermon and we can say, man, what a great sermon that was. Or, oh, man, it got me right here. Or we can read the Bible and we can say, oh, isn't that really cool? And we can talk to people at work and say, I was reading the Bible the other day and found this really neat thing and it said this and, oh, just blew me away. And we can go away amazed and not change. In fact, Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10, he talks about two kinds of repentance. Both of them you feel sorry. One of them you feel sorry, you change, and it leads to life. One of them you feel sorry, and that's it. And he said that leads to death. You can sin, you can do something wrong and say, man, I shouldn't have done that, and then not change, and that's not good enough. These crowds that were so amazed at Jesus. Oh, my goodness, hair on end, blown away, can't believe this guy. Nowhere to be seen when he was crucified. In fact, the crowds there were chanting for his crucifixion. Being amazed is great, and I think if we go into God's presence and we're not amazed, something's wrong. But what Jesus is after is change. Jesus doesn't want our amazement. He wants us to build, and he wants us to build wisely. What are we going to do? Let's pray. God and Father, we thank you. We thank you for your Son. We thank you for not just his death and resurrection, but for his life. We thank you for the words he taught us. And God, we thank you for the way that he showed us on what it means to be human, what it means to be alive. God, we thank you for that. God, we just ask today that we can have a heart for you. Not just that we know the right things to say, not just that we know what to do, but that, God, we can build our lives on you. That, God, that we can have you as the foundation through which all of our decisions run. That's you. We love you, God, and we ask this in your Son's name. Amen. And now we'll have our time of invitation this morning. And again, there's not much at all that I can add to Jesus saying that there's two choices. And he doesn't force it upon us. He doesn't. Otherwise, we'd be robots. We wouldn't be people. He doesn't say, you have to follow me, or I will force you to follow me, or I'll force you not to. He leaves it up to you, and he says, what will it be? Follow me or not? One leads in a good direction and one doesn't, but that's up to you. You can decide.